A talent or a quirk that maybe people might not know about?
I can move my ears without moving my...
Well, your hair's in the way, honestly.
I'm not going to show you.
Oh. Fine. On the trip.
Only talent I have. On the trip. You can see me with my ears.
Hey, Empowered Vegan Lifers. Ella here with my co-host. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, Ella. Happy Thanksgiving. It's a day late.
It is, and this podcast episode is only going to be about 2 weeks in advance, so it's not too far out of the loop. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Yeah.
How was it? Do you have any celebrations around Thanksgiving or anything else?
It was a really great couple of days. It was just Eva and I for most of it, actually. So we watched movies and we played charades and
fun.
Yeah, it's very hard to play charades with just 2 people, but we managed to have a lot of fun doing it. All the kids and I like to play charades, and we usually, divide up into 2 teams of 2, but the other 2 were off and running other places. So we tried, and it was a lot more fun to just laugh at each other than it was to actually play. But yeah, we had a good time.
I bet. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my Thanksgiving was great too. And one thing that I thought of, first of all, my mother is, she makes a feast, and it's not a whole lot of us, but it's this vegan feast with vegan everything, of course, vegan stuffing and mashed potatoes and her infamous vegan sausage gravy, which, so good. Yes. And I also wanted to celebrate one of our members of Vegan Life Coach Academy, our former coaching program client, Sandy, who posted it was her first 100% vegan Thanksgiving, and she did it up and she said it went fantastic. So I just want to celebrate along with everyone who had maybe their first vegan Thanksgiving or made some of their first vegan Thanksgiving meals to serve at Thanksgiving dinner and share with the family. So just shout out to everyone who had their first vegan Thanksgiving.
That's great. Yeah.
And I'm so excited about today's episode, Stephanie. So excited because Colleen Patrick-Goudreau is somebody that I really look up to. And she's been such a positive and powerful voice in the vegan movement for a very long time. She's got a fantastic podcast and just brings that energy. Those guests that have that just amazing energy. They have the experience, the knowledge, but also really know how to speak about it and how to lift people up, even in times and around subjects that are tough to deal with.
Yeah.
So I kind of I got a little googly eyed, and she was like, what's wrong with you? What are you doing? I'm like, no, I feel a little nervous about talking to you. And she just thought that was hilarious. But I get the same thing on occasion when somebody's like, oh, I can't believe I'm speaking to you. I'm like, it's just me,
Right. Absolutely.
It's interesting, but it's a good one. So shall we get to it?
Let's do it.
A little bit more about Colleen. Colleen Patrick-Goudreau's compassionate living philosophy is propelling plant-based eating into the mainstream and forever changing how we regard animals. A recognized expert and thought leader on the culinary, social, ethical, and practical aspects of living compassionately and healthfully, Colleen Patrick-Goudreau is a speaker, cultural commentator, podcaster, and award-winning author of 7 books, including the best-selling The Joy of Vegan Baking, The Vegan Table, Color Me Vegan, Vegan's Daily Companion, On Being Vegan, The 30-Day Vegan Challenge, and her newest book, The Joyful Vegan, How to Stay Vegan in a World That Wants You to Eat Meat, Dairy, and Eggs. Colleen is an acclaimed speaker and beloved host of the inspiring podcast Food for Thought, which has been voted favorite podcast by Veg News Magazine readers several years in a row. She launched a spin-off podcast called Animology in 2017. Along with fellow advocates, she recently formed a political action committee called East Bay Animal PAC to work with government officials on animal issues in the San Francisco Bay Area. Colleen shares her message of compassion and wellness on national and regional TV and radio programs, including a regular segment on Good Day Sacramento and as a monthly contributor on National Public Radio. She had appeared on the Food Network, CBS, PBS, and Fox. Interviews with her have been featured on NPR, Huffington Post, US News and World Report. Her letters and editorials are published in publications such as the New York Times and the Atlantic magazine. And her recipes have been featured on epicurious.com and oprah.com. Colleen lives in Oakland, California, with her husband, David, and 2 cats, Charlie and Machiko. Enjoy. Oh, Colleen, I'm so happy to have you here with me.
Thank you so much. Really, thank you.
No, I was just saying that I've been following you for as long as I can remember, and I'm like a little bit starstruck. So if I stutter, that's what's going on.
We're all doing the same work.
I know. Well, I'm really excited to have you on for countless reasons, but one thing that we haven't done a whole lot of on this show yet is speaking to the ethical vegans. We have such a wide variety of listeners, from, just getting started, being curious about being vegan, to, longtime vegans like myself. But we haven't done a whole lot. And some of our clients have come in talking about just the deep sorrow and sadness that they feel. And even me, Colleen, I was at the gym this morning, and I'm right now listening to your book on Audible. I love that you narrated it too, by the way. And now this is 26 years after I've gone vegan. I'm crying with you talking about the animals in the slaughterhouses, and you don't go into like terrible detail or anything, but I find myself bawling. I'm like, wow, will this ever end? And I just love the joyful vegan, piece of this whole thing, that you bring it all together and help bring positivity to the movement, which we need so badly. So could you start off by talking to those folks out there who are just so deeply sad?
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for just being open and listening, because that is really the first thing we need anybody and everybody to do, is just open our eyes and open our hearts and be aware of what's happening, right? The reason we're able to do so many things to animals, especially those who are raised specifically for human consumption, is because we don't see it every day, and it's hidden from us, and it's hidden in our language, and it's hidden from us quite literally. They're in sheds, there's no windows, but they're also in places where we don't go. And now with laws trying to be passed to make it illegal to even witness, to even take photos or videos. So the best thing we can do for the animals is to at least start there, which is I'm willing to look. And that means that we're then willing to feel bad, because it does feel bad. It doesn't feel great knowing that this is something that we're doing every single minute, second of the day. But that doesn't mean we have to dwell there. And that's really what the joyful part of my work is we can be both aware and responsible, and also embrace the abundance and joy of living in that awareness. To avoid looking means that we're turning away. To look and bear witness does mean that it might hurt, it might smart, because none of us would ever want to do, none of us would commit this kind of violence against anybody. So what I try to do in my work is to say, you can feel sad, and you can also be joyful. We can hold both of those things. It's really a matter of how much we dwell on one or the other. So it's a line. It's a line we walk. It's a balance we have to find. And that has to do with what we expose ourselves to, who we hang out with, who we listen to, who we spend time with, what we're willing to believe in terms of the truth. And for my part, I am hopeful and joyful, because I do think that if you look at history and you have a perspective, you can see that it might not be this direct line in terms of it getting better, but it's definitely getting better. So I try to keep that perspective, and really that's a choice we all have. Which one do we want to believe? What do we want to dwell on?
Yeah, I know I've heard you talk a lot about the Tao Te Ching, and I heard you talk about accepting what is as kind of a prerequisite for then changing it.
Ah, right. Well, yeah. So
I think I just messed that up, but something like that.
No. There's a wonderful line in the Tao that says, "Do you think you could change the world? I don't think it can be done. The world is sacred. It can't be improved. If you tamper with it, you'll ruin it. If you treat it like an object, you'll lose it." And when I hear that line, and I'm someone who is an activist, I'm someone who acts, I'm someone who goes, I'm not complacent, right? And when I heard that, and I really love the Tao, it's just full of so much wisdom, timeless wisdom, 2,000-year-old text. I hear, and I would push back on that, and I would say, no, of course we can improve the world. I'm an advocate, I'm an activist, of course we can. And then it occurred to me that what it's saying is that the world is imperfect. As it is never going to be perfect. There's a wonderful line in Rebecca Solnit's book that says, this is earth, it will never be heaven. And that doesn't mean you become complacent and say, oh, we can't do anything, there's nothing to be done. It means that your expectation then is that we have so much work to do and we can make things better, but it's never going to be perfect. And if we at least have a perspective that's reasonable, in that way, that's reasonable, then we can go about our work and not feel like we're failing just because it's not the idealistic world we hope it would be, but that it's still going to be better than it is now. So that's what I think you were maybe touching on.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the Buddhist philosophy of not being attached, right? And attaching, if we live attached to the outcome of what our actions create, then it sets us up for terrible disappointment, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say most of the wisdom of the world, secular or religious, that resonates with me most, it's really about attachment. The Tao, Buddhism, Stoicism, which is another philosophy that I'm really drawn to, is we can't control what happens out there. All we can control is how we respond to it, and the rest is not ours. I think attachment and expectation is the source of most of our misery and most of our disappointment. And it's practice. It's not like you can just say, I'm not going to be attached to that. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could just turn that off and on? But it is practice. And when we can get there, we find this wonderful balance between acting and then letting go.
Letting go. That's so easy, right?
Right.
So easy to do.
Right.
You talk about willful blindness as well quite a bit. And I think we were just talking about sadness, but sometimes it's anger that kind of hides the sadness, right? It's and that's partly cultural. Is that right?
I think so. I mean, I think anger is just one of these emotions, and some people would even argue it's not an emotion, but I think it's a reaction we have that is very culturally acceptable, especially if you are of the male persuasion. I don't think anger is as well accepted in women. Right. We'd be called catty, or we'd be called, just harsher adjectives than just, oh, he's passionate, he's angry, he's strong, right? But we do have this sense of, especially with men, that anger is more acceptable than even sorrow. But even from women, I hear from women and people who say, first of all, we identify anger, I think, more easily. It's harder to get vulnerable and go underneath the anger, which I think is sadness and sorrow. It's easier to say, oh my God, those people are horrible. Everything sucks and the world is a horrible place. And oh my God, I just want to retreat, versus this is so difficult. This is so hard. I am so sad. And to really go into that place of vulnerability, I think it's just harder. But I think that's really at the heart of what we feel when we see what happens to anybody who is a victim of violence. is that it's sadness. It's just harder to show that emotion. And I think people resist it. I hear people who say like, I don't want to talk about the animals, or I don't want to look at what happens to the animals because it hurts too much. And I don't want to cry. And my answer is cry. Like that is an emotion we have to get in touch with, but that doesn't mean you have to just stay there. It means you cry, you release it, you get in touch with it. And then the next step is, okay, what can I do with this? And, what can I do to help? So I think anger is a real response that we have. But if we dwell in the anger and don't ever go anywhere else from that, then we're never going to feel good. And it's not attractive. I don't think people are attracted to anger. And we're also, I don't think, going to be effective. So I think getting to the vulnerable place of sorrow and sadness, people kind of lean in more when we have a heartfelt response versus an angry response. So it depends on how we want to feel. If you want to feel righteous and, self-righteous and justified, then okay, keep showing that. But I still think that's on the surface and that's not really getting to the heart of the issue.
Right. Yeah. And I had brought up willful blindness because sometimes that is a trigger for people that have seen the light, kind of now see the world through a lens and see all these people, the sea of people around that are willfully blind. And then dealing with that anger in a healthy way is really challenging, especially to the new vegans, right?
Yeah.
Who've feel like they've been tricked and lied to their whole lives. And that can make you really angry.
Absolutely. And so absolutely, if that is the first response you have, feel it, own it, identify it. So it's not that there's anything wrong with anger. It's just if we dwell in it, that's when it can be problematic. And so it's a natural response to wake up and see everyone around you still sleeping and feel really frustrated by that. This goes back to us, what we talked about, letting go. I mean, we know what it was like for us to be asleep, and we have to remember that we weren't, we didn't lack compassion. It was just stifled and it was compartmentalized, and we're supported in every way in our culture to be asleep, because if we go against the grain, there's so much that happens. Like if we go against the grain, our family and friends think we're judging them. They don't want us to change. They want us to stay the same way. We all kind of want things to keep going along the way things were. It upsets everybody if we make a life change like this. So everyone resists us making that change. We just have to remember that when we see them resisting, because we were the same way. So it is totally natural. And we have to find a place to be able to hold both of those things, that there are things that are wrong and we don't want to be part of them, but also we have relationships that we need to cultivate. And especially once we become awake and everybody else is asleep, because if we don't, we really risk just kind of being just a bulldozer over everyone and everything around us. And again, that's just doesn't feel good. It's not attractive and it's not effective.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we just surround ourselves with people that think exactly like us and we're trying to make a difference in the world, that's not going to help. So avoiding being around other people that haven't seen the light yet is not helpful when you're trying to make a difference in the world too. Can you share your story about how you woke up?
Yeah. I mean, it's so boring. It's just so typical, but it is, I think, what I think a lot of us can identify with, which is, I think it's really funny, and you probably get this as well. There's this perception that if you're vegan, you've always been vegan. And people are like, really? Have you all? No, like absolutely not. And I'm in a way kind of grateful for that, because I have a perspective that I wouldn't have had otherwise if I'd only seen the world through one lens. So I grew up, eating animals and loving animals at the same time. I ate everything. My parents, we grew up on the East Coast. We ate veal, chicken, steak, beef. I mean, name it, right? Turkey, everything. And dairy and eggs. My father owned an ice cream store. We literally had a second freezer just for gallons of ice cream. I mean, gallons of ice cream. That's amazing. Our hearts are still ticking. Right? But that was my life. But I was also someone who was very sensitive to animals, and was very, I would intervene if there was any animal who suffered or homeless or what have you. And my parents were supportive of that. And so were the adults around me, but they also didn't want to buck their status quo. And they taught me what they knew, which was, this is what we eat. And they would make excuses as I started getting older and saying, I don't think this doesn't, and they'd be like, no, animals are here for us. And this is what we do. And, we can't live without it. And all of the excuses we make to keep us willfully blind and to not make a change. And then just being curious. I've always been a curious person, and I always sought out information and wisdom and knowing more than I know. So I picked up Diet for a New America. It was John Robbins who wrote this book back in the late 80s. And it was the first book. I mean, a lot of people were inspired also by Diet for a Small Planet. That was Frances Moore Lepay's book, but that was more on how to feed a hungry world. John's book was about really the effects of animal agriculture on the animals, on the environment, and on our health. And that was the first book that made me start this process. And so I stopped eating land animals. But this is what I always tell people too. Like, people are like, how could you even look at a movie or a documentary or read a book and not make a change? Well, I completely missed the boat on the dairy and eggs. Even though he wrote about dairy and eggs, I stopped eating land animals. So I was able to, I kind of compartmentalized what I was willing to do. But years later, I kept asking more questions and being curious, and I read more books. And the book that really put me over the edge, it's always so sad because the title is Slaughterhouse. It's not a happy book. And it's hard to say. I recommend it because it's horrible, but it was the book that changed everything for me. It was the book that made me fully awake. And that's when I stopped eating anything that came off of or out of an animal and, became vegan, which you've probably heard me say. It's such an interesting term because the question is like, did I become something different? Like, what does that mean to become vegan? And the way I characterize it that resonates with me, and I think with others, is I didn't become vegan as much as I removed the blocks to the compassion that was already inside of me. So there were blocks that were still hindering me from being fully unconditionally compassionate. And that's what becoming vegan was for me, was just removing those blocks. And that's when you feel like this liberation and this rawness, but also this joy of like not having to make these excuses anymore and just feeling like I'm fully aligned with my values. And it's the best feeling. And that was 21 years ago. And it's continued to be an amazing feeling, but became an advocate very quickly and decided to devote my life to this as well. So that's my story.
Yes. What was your first forms of advocacy that you started out with?
Tabling, awareness raising. I was doing street TV, which now there's the whole movement of, I guess, Anonymous for the Voiceless. But I mean, before then, I was setting up a TV with other advocates on the streets of Berkeley and showing Meet Your Meat, slaughter videos and handing out Why Vegans. So it was definitely this, I wanted people to see what I hadn't seen, but now saw. And I love those interactions. Like, I don't do that anymore. Our advocacy changes, but the interactions I would have with people were so profound because people would cry and lament and say, oh my God, I don't want to be part of this. And so the questions that followed were questions I wanted to answer. And those were questions about, what do I eat? And what do I cook? And how do I shop? And what about protein? And what about protein? What about protein? And I was like, okay, I need to answer these questions because people want to make a change. They just didn't know how to make a change. So the next form of advocacy I did was teaching cooking classes and developing recipes for people to be able to answer those questions. And then to be able to answer the questions about the ethics in a really safe way for people. Because when people are like eating food and they're happy and their bellies are filled and they ask about dairy, they're more able to hear it in a setting where they feel that they can trust the source. So I loved that whole flow in the cooking classes. And then it turned into my podcast, and then it turned into my books, and it continues to just be whatever mediums I could use to inspire people and to kind of help them along on their journey. That's what it continues to be. It's just in different forms.
When did you start writing your book, The Joyful Vegan?
Well, The Joyful Vegan is the most recent. The first book was The Joy of Vegan Baking, which was 2006. The Joyful Vegan was first a podcast series because what I identified were all of these threads that run through everybody's story. I mean, we all have the same story. It's just with different details. And so I started doing a podcast series on my podcast, Food for Thought, specifically around what these threads were. And I called them the 10 stages of what happens when you stop eating animals. And what started happening was people were writing back saying, oh my God, that's my story. And oh, wow, I'm stuck in stage 5 and I want to get out. And wow, you're mirroring back exactly what my experience was. I'm not alone. And so I was just really grateful to get that response from people. And I knew it had to be a book. And so the series probably started about 6 years ago now, but the book is out now, I think, a year. Yeah, a year.
Yes, the stages are so accurate. It's amazing. And I love you put them, you give people like words of the place they're in. And when somebody reads it that is in one of those stages, it is really like, and people have told me, they're like, it's like she's talking to me, right? And that there's nothing more comforting to having somebody understand where you're at, especially in this crazy world, this carnistic world. What do you think about the term carnism, out of curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a helpful term to, again, give language to. That's what you're talking about, giving word to, giving language to the thing that we can identify with. I just worry about categories because it's so tempting then to say, that's what they are, this is what I am. And I tend to resist that. So I think as a concept, I think it's really helpful to understand kind of the psychological mindset. I just don't like to use it as a category to categorize somebody else, because it makes it seem like, well, I'm this and you're that. Right. So I think can be used. It just, like with anything, I think it just has to be used effectively.
Are there any groups, or do you have any critics that give you a hard time for really meeting people where they're at and helping people kind of,
my biggest critics are vegans. I mean, humans we just really like to be right. And we like to think that what we think is the way to do something is the only way to do something. And I think just our core evolutionary history is tribalism and tribalistic. And I think it's very tempting to say, you're wrong, I'm right, this is the way to do it. And they're not only, I can't just disagree with you, but I have to actually, try to blow the whole thing up. And, I would just say to anybody who's doing the work, if, the problem isn't the people who are doing the work in the world to make this world a better place. The problem are people who are just kind of sitting on their duffs doing nothing. So let's not criticize each other. We can agree and disagree. We can have conversations. We can talk about strategy. But what I just resist and really recoil from is this is my way of doing it and this is their way of doing it, and therefore they're wrong. So, I mean, I'm saying this playfully, but yeah, vegans are the ones who were the most critical of, I think, other vegans.
That was a little rhetorical. I knew that.
Thanks for setting me up there.
Yes, no problem. I know like Faunalytics is such an amazing organization doing research around effective advocacy in your own world. And I've done polls, just anecdotal kind of polls of what is the hardest part of going vegan. And literally, I think there are three. And the first one is non-vegans judging me. Close second is vegans judging me. Right. And then the third is being in social settings, just being out in the world. Do you have any thoughts for people that are going out, that are new to being vegan, going out to dinner? Maybe there aren't a lot of options, just the mindset that could help them not feel so, especially new ones, like embarrassed. A lot of people are embarrassed. There's the really proud ones. And then there are the people, in the earlier stages that feel a little embarrassed or like they're inconveniencing other people.
Yeah. So I would actually add another category to what you just said, and that's us judging ourselves. And it's because of our not embracing who we are and feeling confident enough and having the mindset that we're separate from everybody else, that actually leads us to go into these social situations that make us be, kind of self-effacing and embarrassed and unable or unwilling to communicate our needs. So I would say we need to forget everybody else and forget who's judging you, vegans, non-vegans. We need to forgive ourselves for what we feel was, a harmful habit. And it was okay. We didn't know. Now we know. So we need to forgive ourselves, and we need to embrace who we are now and really understand where we end and another person begins. So a lot of the scenarios in these social situations tend to be, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want people to feel like I'm preaching. Okay, well then don't preach. I mean, don't preach. And then however someone takes what you're saying, back to what we were saying earlier, right? That's not yours. You just be you, and, respectfully, don't just dump, on someone and then just be like, that's whatever they respond. That's not mine. Obviously doing it mindfully, that we say, no, I'm vegan. I love being vegan. I don't want to hurt animals. And that feels really good to me. We can say that. And if someone takes offense to that, that's not ours. But if we do say something like, you're hurting animals still, I stopped, and do you realize what you're contributing to? People aren't going to take that so well. So that's not the way to go about it. But if we go about it and say, I love being vegan, I'm really grateful to be vegan, if you want any information, I'd be so happy to share it with you. And tell our stories and speak from the I. And when we go out to a restaurant saying like, hey, I'm vegan, can you let me know what kinds of things you can make for me now that I'm paying you money to make me food, right? Right. You're there as a customer. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. And when we kind of come from that place, people respond much more from a high place. If we respond from this kind of meek, like I'm embarrassed, I don't want to piss anybody off, then people are going to be like, oh, yeah, right. So we're basically teaching people how to treat us. So forget how everybody else reacts to you. Just show up in your most authentic place, from the most compassionate place for yourself and for other people, and people will respond accordingly.
Oh, that's so good, Colleen. That's like so good for this podcast, for all our listeners. It's really been my experience as well. It's how you show up, and you show up joyful and, proud and confident in where you're at. People are like drawn to you, not the other way around.
They are. And people can read it as well. If we have so that's why I always talk about our communication with someone starts long before we start talking to them. It's how we perceive them too. So if we show up in a situation and we're kind of arrogant and we're self-righteous and we think we're better and we're angry about what they're participating in, we're angry about their willful blindness, and we're whatever it is, people can feel that energy from us. And so long before we even open our mouths, people can feel our judgment. And so I know that it's necessary in the movement to talk about that other people judge us, or that other people feel defensive around us, and I'm not interested in how other people are acting. I'm interested in how I behave, so that I can walk away saying I did the best I could. And if someone else, didn't act from their highest, then that's not great. But let me at least try to understand why. And did I do anything to contribute to that? And if not, okay, then that's good to know too. But if I did, okay, what could I do differently so that I can, again, show up in from my highest self, and create a space for someone else to show up from their highest place as well. That's all I can control. I can't control how everybody else acts.
Yes. Yes. From what I know, you have a little bit of a different take on what people would call compassion fatigue. And I know for me, I feel like I have compassion fatigue quite a bit for humans. I never feel like I get it for non-human animals. But what do you talk about in terms of helping people who just feel exhausted from, and burnt out?
Yeah. I mean, my take is just, first of all, in terms of the term, and I'm not, this is not my original thinking. Other people who talk about this concept in psychology and social psychology there are people who are starting to use the term empathic distress. And I prefer that because it really is, for me, when you say not you, but when one says compassion fatigue, it sounds like we're fatigued by our compassion. And to me, it's the distress we feel of being so in tune to somebody else's suffering, which is what empathy is. And so empathic distress, just for me, characterizes that more accurately, because compassion fatigue, for me, compassion isn't the problem. Compassion is the solution. And so when we're feeling so burnt out, first of all, we have to check in with ourselves and see if we're over bearing witness, if that's the term to use, if we're exposing ourselves without any reprieve to suffering, we have to have a reprieve. And I think part of the problem is that people who care so much, and animal advocates especially, obviously people who work with people as well, but those who care so much feel guilty if we stop looking. We feel that we owe it to the animals to keep looking and to keep bearing witness. And I do think we have to continue to bear witness, I think, for the length of our lives and our journeys, but that doesn't mean you have to stare. I think we have to look, but we don't have to stare. And so we have to be really honest with ourselves. Like, what's my motivation? Am I doing this because I feel like I have to? And if I don't, I'm not, being a good advocate? Or am I using it in a way that is part of my advocacy so that I can educate and raise awareness with other people and staying in touch with my own reasons for first becoming vegan, right? So we have to be honest with ourselves. And we also have to make sure that we're not doing something that's also kind of martyrish. I think there's a bit of martyrdom that happens, and it's not from a bad intention. It's from a good intention of, again, wanting to bear witness and wanting to be present and aware and responsible, but we really can overcorrect and then become martyrs and feel like we're the only ones who care and nobody else does. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous for our own mental health. It's dangerous for our relationships with others, but I also think it's dangerous in terms of our longevity, in terms of being vegan, because if we overcorrect and feel like the whole world sucks, then what's the point of doing anything anyway? And we can stop being vegan and stop being animal advocates. I know that there are people who say, no, that's not possible. It would never happen. Okay, well, then the risk is that you wouldn't be joyful. And the risk is that you wouldn't enjoy life. And isn't part of the point of living compassionately to enjoy life? So we have to just keep that in check. And again, back to what we were saying earlier, this isn't something you just will, and this isn't something you just decide once. It's practice. And so whatever practice works for you, anybody listening, that you do on a regular basis, whether it's journaling or meditation or yoga or some kind of practice that is honing and cultivating compassion for yourself and for others, is really the secret. It's really the secret. And then you're better able to read when you're maybe getting too close to burnout, and you can say, I need to pull back a little bit, versus going so far that you just go over the edge. So we have to cultivate the stuff that we want to do well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you ever heard the term tactical empathy?
No, tactical empathy, no.
It just came to my mind. I was reading this book by Chris Voss, not vegan related at all, but it's on negotiation. And so he's talking about, he was, a negotiator with the FBI or something. And he was talking about how he had to create tactical empathy for, and I know this is maybe a crazy comparison, but for like people who kidnappers, for example, right? To be able to understand them, to be able to relate to them, even though he's obviously not condoning what they're doing, but he had to create some sort of empathy. And so he called it tactical empathy. And I just thought how great for those of us like myself who can sometimes, it's hard to be empathetic to people when they're choosing to be blind to this stuff. But if I can think about tactical empathy, it just gives it like this kind of military, like strong word, but also with the empathy. What do you think about that?
I think that's absolutely brilliant. I love it. I love it because there's such a misconception about, and you're talking about empathy, let's talk about compassion or forgiveness. There's such a misconception because the implication is, if I'm compassionate towards someone who's doing wrong or committing violence or hurting someone, animal, non-human, whatever, then I'm condoning that behavior. And it's so wrong-headed because it's not about condoning behavior. I can feel empathy or compassion for someone who's committing violence and also be completely opposed to that violence. And so I love that. And it's the concept behind a love and kindness meditation, which is something that I recommend in the book. And it's something that I practice, aspire to, it's a commitment to do this, but it is so brilliant because what it's doing is it's acknowledging that it's not about you again, it's about me. It's like, it's really easy to be compassionate to someone who's like good and kind and loving.
Right.
The challenge is being compassionate to someone who, could even just be mean. It doesn't have to be like some murderer, violent, horrible person. But the point that it gets to is you go, oh, this is about how I am responding to somebody else because I don't want to carry anger and I don't want to carry hatred. I want to be able to be as compassionate as possible. And so I'm going to feel it for them and to go to that space and to very consciously, tactically choose to find compassion for someone who it's really challenging to find compassion for. That's the stuff that kind of, helps us, I think, evolve in leaps and bounds from an emotional place.
Yes. I love that. The vegan club. I love to talk about the vegan club, or who was it that called it Veganville? How we can be more inviting, right? There's so many different kinds of advocacy. However, I think one of the best, and tell me what you think, is just showing what a wonderful, welcoming, joyful club the vegan club is. Now, I get there's a line between not wanting people to feel categorized and blocked out, but what do you think about how do we do that? How do we make veganism appealing to people?
Yeah. Well, it's hard, right? Because there's not one vegan mind. So I can say this, and really what I'm saying is how can we individually be as inclusive as possible? Because there isn't one way. People are going to be attracted to different kinds of advocacy and different reasons for stopping eating animals. All we can do is be the most authentic, best representation. The most authentic representation, not some artificial representation. There's a lot of conversation around like, should we talk about the animal? Should we talk about health? Should we talk about nutrition? Should we talk about food? Talk about what's most authentic for you, because the people who are in your life already or watching you on social media or what have you are going to be attracted to you based on what they're interested in and based on your authenticity and your passion and your joy. So it's about authenticity. It's not about kind of trying to do something that, that just tries to attract people. That doesn't work. It has to come, like if I talked about, I don't even know what would be inauthentic for me because I come from a lot of different places, but it has to be authentic. And then again, like we have to understand, I've been working on a podcast episode I haven't released yet. I'm being very ginger about it because what I want to say is there's not one vegan movement. I think that's part of the reason we have this infighting is because people presume we're all part of the same movement. And when you have this impression that you're one movement, then anybody who doesn't toe the line seems like an imposter. And then you're able to say, you're not really vegan. And it's like, well, who are you? A, who are you to judge? And B, maybe the problem is that we're thinking of it as one umbrella versus thinking about the commonalities we have, but there are different movements. And then we can say, okay, we can live next to each other as different movements versus thinking that there's a right or wrong way to be as a vegan. And so that's just something I'm playing with in terms of helping people understand why you can say plant-based, or you could say vegan, or it could be from health, or it could be from food. It doesn't matter. They all live as separate kind of silos that live next to each other. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. Yeah, we got the plant-based, we got the ethical vegans, and people are looking for reasons to call other people out instead of appreciating the work that they are doing, right?
Exactly. So there's a notion, Freud actually coined this term called the, what is it? The phenomenon of small differences or something like that. What is it? I talk about it in the Joyful Vegan. And it's the idea that the more closely related you are, the more you're inclined to see the small differences versus really I mean, it's literally, when I think about religion and you think about like Protestantism and you think about like how the Calvins wanted to kill the Methodists and who wanted to kill the Presbyterians because of these little tiny little differences in the way they worship. Like, that's not the problem. The problem is not, do you eat oil or not? Right. like the issue is we all want to do the best we can to not contribute to harm to animals or to ourselves. Like, that's the bottom line. And anybody who's doing that and doing that work in the world and representing that is doing the good work. What we need to focus on, is not the 3% difference that we have, is the 97% commonalities we have. And then let's focus on the outside of that group, that club, and focus on the people who aren't even close to any of those groups, right? So that's what I would encourage people to do, is just stop. We get really myopic and again, tribalistic. And if we just stepped back and said, okay, this is what I care about. This is what inspired me. I'm going to share that with the world and be as authentic as possible. Oh, and you're doing that over there? Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to focus on facing outward as opposed to focusing inward in this club, in this little, myopic way.
Yeah, no, so good. And I'd even expand that. And so we've got the different kind of takes on veganism and different types of advocacy. And then the other social justice movements, we can even throw those in. If we're supporting, the plant-based, if the vegans are supporting the plant-based people, are supporting the people that are working on, racism, sexism, it's all related, right? It's all interconnected, and supporting people that are making a difference in whatever way they're making a difference can kind of open the doors to us all growing, right? Would you say that?
Well, I think so. I think the problem is when we have a presumption that they should think the way we do, and if they don't, then they're bad, wrong, ineffective, whatever. And like, you hear that rhetoric in different movements where they're like, I can't believe that they're environmentalists, but they eat animals. Okay, well, get over it. They do. Let's try to understand why. Okay, they're part of the same culture we are. They have their own willful blindness. They feel like they're doing good work over here and don't need to do it over here. What can we do to actually inspire them, as opposed to just this, see, God, I can't believe, there's a lot of like, I can't believe it. Well, okay, believe it. And now what's the next step?
Right.
Let's get over it.
Right.
Create coalitions and create relationships, as opposed to, oh my God, I can't believe they don't understand.
Yeah, we all have blind spots, right? And I think we forget that we have our own blind spots that we don't even know about yet.
Oh, right? Absolutely. So again, focus on you and who you are and what you want to bring to the world, and not what everybody else is doing wrong, because we can't control that. And we're just going to feel frustrated, and we're going to burn out, and we're going to be judgmental, and we're not going to be very joyful, and we're not going to be very attractive. Because I don't know about you, but like, when someone's kind of judgy and angry and, self-righteous, that is like the last person I want to go hang out with. And that doesn't mean we still can't be passionate. I am the most passionate person when it comes to what I care about, and animals. And I don't hide that, but I hold that passion for animals and my desire for them to not suffer, along with, I think the world is a good place. And I think there's a lot of really good people in it. And I'm just going to keep doing what I can to be part of the solution, and hold both of those things, which is, I want animals to not suffer, and I want to be a happy person, right? We have to be able to hold both of those things. And I think that's the mistake. We feel that if we're in any way joyful, then we're not demonstrating our concern and our care, our compassion for animals.
Yes, totally. Okay, random question. What do you think about the cultured meat industry that's rising up really quickly, and I'm really hoping they're going to get cat food out very soon?
I know. Actually, do you know Paul Shapiro? You should talk to Paul.
I do want to talk to Paul.
Yeah, you really need to. His book, Clean Meat, is quite fantastic. I call it The History of the Future, because he talks about really the foundation of the idea of cultured meat that goes back a long way. And then, of course, the hope for the future. I'm excited by it. I'm excited by anybody who's doing anything to find solutions for what is an industry that doesn't look like it's waning anytime soon. The animal agriculture industry is entrenched, it's ingrained in both, obviously, the West, but also now the East that looks to the West and wants to do the same kinds of things we do. I mean, so you see, China and the consumption of animal products in countries where, there's more affluence. I mean, when you have affluence, you have more animal products. That's just the way it's been. And so, we can't just hope that everyone's going to become vegan. We just can't. So there has to be lots of different paths and ways for people to say, I don't want to be part of that. And we're not going to torture animals anymore. And clean meat and cultured meat is obviously, and plant-based meat. I mean, it's all of these things. It's not one or the other. Is incredibly exciting. And Paul has a podcast called Business for Good. And he just interviewed a woman talking about specifically cultured meat for cat food.
Oh, was it the Because Animals,
Yes.
Shannon or something?
Yes.
Oh, yes, I emailed her.
Oh, good. Yeah. So exciting. I am so moved by, I mean, I am not a person who would get into like a product. I mean, that's just
right.
not
Yeah.
I feel like kind of like the startup around plant-based and cultured meat is like the new activism from the 80s. That's new, people are just starting businesses because that's kind of where it's at. And in a capitalistic country, which is great, this is what we get to do. We get to provide all of these solutions in the marketplace for people to decide if they want them or not. So any debate, whether it's good, bad, healthy, not healthy, shut up. It's going to happen and you don't have to buy it. That's called capitalism. Don't buy it if you don't want it, but that it's there for other people. Fantastic.
Yes, agreed, 1,000%. Now, the one concern that I have on that is the subsidies. What are we going to do with those subsidies that are going to keep the animal agriculture industry alive and keep the prices of those products down? How do we get the prices of the plant-based and the cultured meat to match when the government is subsidizing $1.70 for every dollar, or it's something like meat should be 3 times as high as it is.
Oh,
if it was truly capitalism.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people would not buy it if they had to pay the true cost of these animal products. And that's what's so skewed, because people talk about and complain about the price of, organic fruit and vegetables. And it's like, no. They're not expensive. You're just so used to paying cheap nothing for very expensive foods. Producing meat, dairy, and eggs is very expensive, but because of the subsidies and because of the buybacks and because of all the government support, it's very artificially cheap. So the answer is, I don't think that can sustain much longer. And there are organizations working on this. I mean, even the Good Food Institute is working on making it a level playing field. Plant-Based Food Association lobby, plant-based food lobby group, which we need. So those are the kinds of things that people are interested in. Government changes, which, is as slow as molasses, but it happens. This is why voting is really important. It's why getting involved politically is very important, local, regional, federal. We all have to be involved, but there are organizations working specifically on these kinds of issues. So support them in doing this really important work.
Yeah, and we see it. I mean, we have Cory Booker and Eric Adams now. These are, we're getting in there. It's slow, but the more we can participate in this system that's broken, but we have to fix it. All of us have to work together. So
absolutely. And I will just say, it doesn't just take the vegans in Congress or in mayorships. It really, non-vegans are also doing really good work. And it's not to say that I'm not like, yay, Cory Booker and Eric Adams, it's fantastic. But there are a lot of people who do care, and they still have their blind spots. They might not personally have eschewed animal products, but they are passing laws that they know is best for the future and best for their children and the environment, whatever their motivation. So there are a lot of wonderful, representatives who are doing good work, even if they're not vegan. So we have to, those are the kinds of things that we need to ask them about when we're voting for them or when we're supporting their campaigns or not. What is your position on animal agriculture? What are you doing to change subsidies? What are you doing to make a difference for the environment, et cetera, et cetera? Those are the kinds of questions we can ask of our public officials.
Yes. All right. Well, I could go on and on. I will not keep you much longer. I would love to hear if the trip thing is going to happen again anytime soon. I would love to go on one of those trips with you.
Oh, you need to come. They're so amazing. So yeah, so we've been running what we call joyful vegan trips. We were calling them CPG trips. That was kind of an internal name for my initial CPG, but that doesn't mean anything to the public. So joyful vegan trips, which is my brand. We've run trips to Vietnam, to Thailand, to several times to France in the wintertime, total like comfort, Christmassy holiday comfort. We've run trips to Rwanda, Botswana we've got coming up, and Italy. So we obviously were curtailed for 2 years because of COVID, and we just ran our first trip to Tuscany, Italy, just earlier this month. And it was amazing. So 20 people came with us and we just spoiled the heck out of them. And we're doing the same. So Botswana's coming up. Italy next year. Yeah, they're trips to be able to spoil vegans and give them just the most incredible experience, enjoying the abundance of travel. There's no reason that they should go pay the same thing for a trip that everybody else is paying and get mediocre food and mediocre experiences. So these trips are all about making sure you have the most incredible food. We take care of all of the details. You don't have to do a thing. And there's always an animal advocacy component as well. We go to sanctuaries or we support conservation work in the countries we go to, or a place like Rwanda, where we're literally going and, visiting the mountain gorillas, which is the only place in the world they exist. And they're wonderful. So yeah, people can join. It's always on a first come, first serve basis, and they fill up pretty quickly. So joyfulvegantrips.com is where people can find out more.
Amazing. Well, we're going to put the links to your book, your podcast, your trips, your website, your online cooking. We're going to put that all in the show notes. Is there anything else that you're working on that you just want to tease for us?
I'm working on a book proposal for zero waste. So I'm excited about that. So I've been doing lots more content on my social media channels and on the podcast. So start getting those seeds planted to reduce, stuff and plastic as much as possible. And hopefully we'll get a book out, and it's going to have lots of new recipes as well, a lot of homemade recipes. Yeah.
Awesome. Can I challenge you with a little sprint round?
Sure.
Okay. I got 5 questions.
Okay.
All right, I'll start with the really easy ones. Tofu, tempeh, or edamame?
Tofu.
One food that you could eat every day for the rest of your life?
God.
It's supposed to be an easy one.
I know. I have a lot.
I know. You don't actually have
tofu. Probably tofu. I'd say carrots. I love carrots.
What would be a non-human animal that you share a lot of characteristics with?
Goats.
You did not just say goats.
Yeah.
Why goats?
Because they're sassy and they're playful and they're social, and when they want to be alone, they just go off to be by themselves.
My gosh, because I interviewed Dustin Harder. Do you know the vegan roadie? He's
okay.
Yeah. Oh my God, he's so fabulous. He said goats. I like. Okay. I was like, wow. No, and then I forgot to ask him why. Okay. But he's sassy, so I don't know. Maybe it's the same thing. Something on your bucket list that you haven't done yet.
Oh my God, bucket list. Oh my God. I don't know if it's on my bucket list. I have karaoke.
Oh my God. Have you never done it? I haven't either. It's on my bucket list too. Oh my gosh. Trip karaoke.
As long as no one films it. As long as no one films it.
Deal. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, last one. A talent or a quirk that maybe people might not know about.
I can move my ears without moving my.
Well, your hair's in the way, honestly.
I'm not going to show you.
Oh. Fine. On the trip. The
only talent I have on the trip. You'll see me move. You can see me move my ears.
Deal. Awesome. Colleen, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Oh, I enjoyed it so much. What a wonderful, enriching conversation. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to share it with everybody. Thank you.